Hello there. They told us exactly what they were going to do back in 2019, but no one was listening or paying attention. Now, having this stuffed down your craw might anger a lot of people, especially as the plan is just to force it on us without debate or permission. Just like Sadiq Khan's expansion of those 20-mile-per-hour zones and the ULEZ in London. So for those that follow this channel, you'll be aware that I published a video recently about Sadiq Khan banning cheese adverts. And I said at the time that this probably has more to do with net zero targets than with childhood obesity, given the goodness that can be derived from eating sensible portions of cheese. And for those following the net zero debate, you will be aware that there is an international organisation called C40 Cities, and also that the current London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, is also the current chairman of that body, a position he's held since 2021. And C40 Cities is one of the main drivers of the net zero agenda and low traffic neighbourhoods and building so-called sustainable cities, all in lockstep with the WEF and the UN. And back in 2019, in a headline report by the University of Leeds called The Future of Urban Consumption in a 1.5 degree centigrade World, in that report, C40 Cities outlined targets for the reduction in the number of private vehicles, as well as cutting down how much meat and dairy produce city dwellers will consume. I knew there was a net zero connection to that cheese ad ban. And two targets were set. A progressive target. It had to be progressive, didn't it? And an ambitious target, with the progressive target being based on research that identifies the threshold of resource efficiency and behavioural change potential as defined by current technology and progressive changes in consumer choices. And the ambitious level target being based on a future vision of resource-efficient production and extensive changes in consumer choices. And it's the ambitious one which they're aiming for in reality. And it goes on to explain the consumption interventions will both require significant changes to consumer patterns and individual behaviours, as well as usher in structural changes across entire supply chains and industries. That means massive changes all round. Let's take a quick look at some of those targets. Take personal cars, for example. Sadiq Khan's C40 Cities wants to see a reduction in private transport to a progressive figure of 190 vehicles per 1,000 people by 2030. That's 19%. And the ambitious target is for, yes, you guessed it, 0 personal cars for everybody. And about 54% of households in London currently own at least one vehicle. And they also want to see cars last 20 years under a progressive target, but 50 years under the ambitious target. Now, fewer cars lasting longer means much, much pricier cars. And that will drastically reduce the number of cars on the road, and who can afford to own them. Only the privileged will have personal transport. But it doesn't stop there. C40 Cities also wants to see us buy fewer new clothes by 2030, with a progressive target of only 8 new items of clothing a year and an ambitious target of just 3 new items a year. I wonder if a pair of socks or shoes counts as 1 or 2 items. The entire fashion industry just went down the pan. And it will hit places like football clubs that rely on selling oodles of high-priced, ever-changing kits so they can pay those extortionate salaries to their players. And now we come to food. C40 cities claim that 13% of city emissions are caused by our current food consumption methods. Roughly 3/4 of these emissions stem from consumption of animal-based foods, with the remaining 25% from the consumption of plant-based foods, it says. So C40 cities are talking about reducing our meat consumption by 2030 to 16 kilograms a year, under the progressive target, and 0 under the ambitious target. And be in no doubt these ambitious targets are the eventual real aim. The progressive ones are just part of the route map. Now 16 kilograms a year is 44 grams per day, or for the traditionally minded, 1.55 ounces. Now I've just bought a normal-sized supermarket sirloin steak that weighs 227 grams, or 8 ounces. These C40 cities rules would limit you to only 70 meat meals a year if you only ate steak of that size in a year. Now lamb steaks are smaller, but still come in at about 100 to 150 grams a piece, as do chicken breasts. And at 150 grams or 5.3 ounces, it comes out at 100 proper meat meals a year, one every 3.5 days. But 0 real meat is their ambitious aim, their real aim for you. But there will be plenty of meat for the elites. And let's look at the dairy side, and this covers everything from milk to cheese to butter to yoghurt. Think about how much of that you consume in a year. C40 cities wants to limit your consumption of dairy products to 90 kilograms a year, or on the ambitious scale, to 0. And I have to ask, are any of these limits acceptable to you? Now, interestingly, C40 cities also wants to see us consume about 2,500 calories a day, when on average in the UK at present we only consume 2,100 calories a day, which actually means C40 cities wants us to be eating more food. So that tells me that our overlords are expecting us to lead a much more physically active lifestyle. All that walking and cycling we'll be doing, no doubt. That is when they let us out of our houses, of course. And all these food and dairy reductions will see a 60% drop in our food consumption emissions, they say. Although eating these new Frankenstein foods made in factories and insects might lead to many emissions of another sort, if you get my drift. And all this fiddling with how we live our lives are called consumption interventions. Now C40 Cities has a forum where the eco-loons can get together and plot out more fiendish ways to control our lives, what we do, what we eat, and what we drink, and when and where we do it. It is all freedom squashing by those that arrogantly believe they should have the power to do this to us, to ceaselessly lecture, educate, and ultimately dictate to us. This is control freakery disguised as saving the planet. And for those thinking that they'll jet away from it all on an annual holiday abroad, think again. Sadiq Khan's C40 Cities wants to see you make one flight every 2 years under the progressive target and one flight every 3 years under the ambitious target. But those flights are the short-haul flights, less than 1,500 kilometres. But funnily enough, no limits on long-haul flights, as many as the people who can afford it want to make, it appears. It's just that any journey less than 1,500 kilometres should be taken by sea, train or coach, and maybe hot air balloon, or flying unicorn perhaps. Now, during PMQs yesterday, Rishi Sunak once again said that his vision of net zero was to reduce emissions without changing our lifestyles. But C40 Cities has the absolute opposite view. So does the WEF and so does the UN. And with Keir Starmer being such an avid fan of the Davos-based WEF, we know exactly which policy will prevail. Unless we choose differently at the ballot box.